Also on there. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see a well-attended meeting this month. So here we are for the meeting of the Boston Borough Council Planning Committee. My name is Councillor David Middleton, and I am the chairman of this committee. And today I'm being supported by Councillor David Scoots on my right, who is the vice chair of this committee. We'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is being live streamed, so what you see over here is what's going out onto YouTube, I believe. So before we move to the agenda, we invite our officers supporting this meeting to introduce themselves. On my right, we have Martha.
Morning, Kevin. My name is Martha Rees, Mrs. Legal Services Manager.
And on my left, we've got Mike Gildersleeves.
Yep, so Mike Gildersleeves, Assistant Director for Planning and Strategic Infrastructure across the partnership. Thank you.
And then we've got Abby Marwood.
Yes, good morning. I'm Abby Marwood. I'm the Deputy Development Manager for the office.
And then we have Lauren Burkle.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm Lauren Burkle. I'm Principal Town Planner for Boston Borough Council.
And on my left, we've got Karen List.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, the next thing is we have some housekeeping rules, and just to inform you that restroom facilities are available on this floor for the ladies and halfway down the main stairwell for the gentlemen. In the event of a fire alarm sounding, officers will escort everyone to the nearest safety point in the rear car park. Please ensure that when you are addressing this meeting that you do so through the microphone system that assists people with who are hard of hearing, anything like that, and not live speaking. Members of the public are free to leave this meeting at any time, and our supporting officers will escort them downstairs. And finally, please be advised that abuse or intimidation of any kind will not be tolerated. Anyone who is deemed to breach this requirement will be warned and asked to refrain, and if the behaviour persists, then they will be asked to leave the meeting. Thank you. So now we move on to part one of the agenda and address the preliminary items. So to receive apologies for absence and notification of any substitutions.
Thank you, Chairman. We have two apologies for absence this morning. The first from Councillor Staples with Councillor Dorian substituting. The second from Councillor Flight with Councillor Williams substituting. Thank you.
And next item is to sign the minutes of the last meeting held on the 6th of July 2023. Do I have a committee's agreement to sign these minutes, please? Sorry, 6th of June. July meeting.
Thank you, Chairman.
So moving on to item 3, before we move to individual declarations of interest, in respect of any item on this agenda, I will ask Aaron to give the standing declarations.
Thank you, Chairman. For public information, I would confirm that standing declarations of interest will be recorded within the minutes for this meeting. All committee members who are also members of the Lincolnshire County Council, the South East Lincolnshire Joint Strategic Planning Committee, and also representatives for the Internal Drainage Force. Thank you.
And does any member of the committee have any further declaration of interest to make in respect of any item on this agenda, please? So, start, we'll go left to right. So, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. B230046. I wish to speak as the ward member on this item, please.
Thank you. Who else? Councillor Bedford.
On B220356, Mr. Ray is known to be as a member of Absolute Drainage Board, but that is in fact not his name.
Councillor Rain. Right, look, sorry.
Thank you. Planning at B230112, I had a phone call from the applicant's wife, and I did not get involved in any conversations with her regarding this application. And again, B220356, I know Mr. Ray, he's on the black space. That will not affect him.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Then item 4 is to receive any written questions from the members of the public.
I have no questions today, Chairman.
So that concludes our preliminary items, and we will now move into part 2 of the agenda and receive the reports tabled. Our first item today is planning application B230046 on page 11 of the agenda, and will be presented by Ms. Abby Moll.
Thank you, Chairman. The first plan application is B230046. This is the full application for a two-story dwelling at the corner of Englow, which is located at the junction of Old Main Road and Cruisergate and Fosdyke. The officer recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. The site is part of the garden to the existing dwelling. It's predominantly a residential neighbourhood, but there is an agricultural garden moving to the north. You can see on this photograph to the north. It's a full application for the subdivision of the existing subdivision to 2 plots, the creation of a new.
Excuse me, can you speak up, please?
Creation of a new vehicular access from Old Main Road and the erection of a predominantly 2-storey detached three-bed dwelling. The application has been called into committee by Councillor David Brown, who raised concerns that the proposal would be incongruous to its surroundings. We've also received objections from the owner of the agricultural yard to the north, and 2 business associates expressing concerns that the long-standing HGV unloading and loading practices will be prevented as a result of this application. The proposal will harm the character and appearance of the area. The proposal will not provide satisfactory amenity for its occupants, and the proposal will adversely impact on the privacy of the host bungalow. As a result of consultations, we've received no objections from consultees, including environmental health, internal drainage, Lincolnshire County Council, or the Environment Agency. There has been previous planning permission in 2010 for new access on Old Main Road. It's not clear whether this has been fully implemented or not, but it did not appear to be in use at the time of staff's visit. That's the red line there is where the previous 2010 application granted permission for previous access, and that's the same as this proposal in the same location. So the main issues with this application, in terms of principle, the site is classed as an infill within the settlement boundary, contribute to meeting the housing need and according to policy 1 of the local plan. It's located in a residential neighbourhood and is considered to be in scale with nearby dwellings, including recently built dwellings on Cruisergate. Although the plot will be slightly smaller than average, it will not appear cramped and is adequate amenity space for both the host and future occupiers. Environmental health indicate that they've had a minor noise issue complaints with the agricultural yard. Previous complaints from 2016 related to noise caused by a radio and running engines and not actually activities of the yard itself. In terms of flood risk, there has been a successful sequential test which demonstrates that no alternative available sites in Fosdyke are at less risk. Mitigation measures have been included in the flood risk assessment, and the Environment Agency raised no objections to the proposal on these grounds. In terms of highway safety and parking, especially around the use of the agricultural yard, highways have raised no objections. The current HGV loading and unloading on the highway is not right, it's not lawful, and as a result of this proposal, although it would alter the access, it would be something for the business to address. And therefore, the officer report is for approval. If you look at the site process, this is from the junction, you can see the existing dwelling there. That's the new dwellings on Buttergate, which are recently built. Where the car is parked related to the access. And that's just another view along the road, so you can see the access where the red car is, and then the agricultural yard, which is going down. That concludes the
So now we have Mr. Finch here. Would you like to come forward, Mr. Finch, and take a seat? And you have 5 minutes to give your representation. After 4.5 minutes, you get 1 bell, and after 5 minutes, you get 2 bells. And afterwards, if you could remain in your seat so that people can chance to ask questions if they would like to. Would you, Mr. Finch?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and ladies of the committee. My name is Alan Finch. Right, I'll speak a bit later.
We need to have your microphone, so please make sure you've got your mic. Everybody watching, recording. Yeah, it's not great, isn't it?
Excellent, I'll start again. Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman and ladies of the committee. My name is Alan Finch of Malvern London Planning Limited, and I'm here to represent Mr. Alan Lowson.
What about yours, David? Yours is
Yeah.
closest, isn't it?
No, I've stopped with double out as well. I don't know, because the whole working, but mine was working fine.
Yes, my name's Alan Finch, Malvern London Planning. I'm here to represent Mr. Alan Moulton, who owns the agricultural premises located immediately to the north of the application site. Mr. Moulton's business has operated from his site for over 70 years. But whilst he is certainly not against development of the village, he is specifically concerned that the proposal to locate the new vehicular access to the proposed dwelling immediately adjacent to his established access. In October 2010, the Borough Council refused planning for a new dwelling within the curtilage of the existing bungalow. That proposal was considered to be an incongruous feature when assessed in relation to the design and layout of development in the surrounding area. This current proposal places a house between the existing bungalow and the public highway, described by the planning officer as infill, a slightly unusual form of infill, placing, say, a new dwelling in front of an existing single story. The impact of that dwelling is compounded by the requirement for the ground floor level to be 750 millimetres above existing ground level, and therefore that of the bungalow. The officer report acknowledges that amenity space to the new dwelling would be smaller than those currently in the locality. It is therefore difficult to understand what has changed since that 2010 decision that makes this application acceptable. Yes, the South East Links local plan adopted in March 2019 does now facilitate suitable development in settlements such as Fosdyke, but it also requires development to be appropriate to its location in terms of character and scale. We believe this proposal is not in keeping with the character of this part of the village, which is of generally low density with good separation, good garden space and generous frontages onto the village street scene. For this reason, we object to the current proposal. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Have we got any questions for Mr. Finch? Councillor Pierpoint.
Getting back to the vehicle access, you said it's opposite to where the proposed vehicle access opposite to where this business is. What problems do you perceive that's going to interfere with your business if this application went ahead?
As I say, that build the businesses have use of that commercial access for over 70 years. Vehicles attending site were able to park on the highway quite legitimately. The introduction of a a residential single access immediately adjacent to it could create issues for the occupiers of the new dwelling, where height and visibility can be varied depending on what vehicles are legitimately parked on the highway. It just seems a bit of a conflict of placing two accesses very close to each other, when there was a scheme done several years ago where there was the possibility of a vehicular access on the Buttock Gate, which would have served both properties.
Can I ask the officers then, what this gentleman is obviously objecting to the fact that the vehicle access is too close to the other.
Just a minute.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
We can ask that later on. Everything, the questions now are just about what Mr. Finch's.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
I'd like to ask a question. You just mentioned there that parking on the highway is legitimate. Is unloading the lorries? I mean, how does the unloading go on? Is it full of trucks? What's happening across the road there?
I believe it's varied in the method of unloading or loading vehicles. If the vehicles are parked to the near side as they are at the access point, it doesn't involve forklift trucks, for example, going out onto the public highway. They can load from the access point itself, therefore in private property.
Councillor Dorian?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to, I didn't realise that your applicant had been treated, not your applicant, your representative had been treated for 70 years, it's a long time. On page 18, the Highway Authority mentions that they've never established any legal right through precedents to continue the practice of loading and unloading. So why in 70 years hasn't your client taken the opportunity to regulate what they're doing?
It's difficult for me to speak, obviously, as his representative in full detail. But as I say, if it's been operating there for that length of time and there haven't been highways issues that might have been enforced by the local authority, highways authority or the police, then that business is successfully operating without detriment to any of the neighbouring properties, without the need for any enforcement.
That isn't what I asked you, really. I asked you why they haven't taken the opportunity to regulate and establish precedents, because this report says they haven't regulated that.
Well, I'm not an expert, unfortunately, on highways and regulation, but it isn't a haulage yard. That's the thing I would say. The premises is an agricultural farmyard. To facilitate the access and egress of HGV vehicles into that site would involve moving the very thing that the business operates from, which is sheds and the various produce and so on. It's not been a problem to anybody for all those years, as I understand it. It just seems a little bit of an opportunity here that if that access could have been placed around the corner in front of the gate, then everything would carry on as well. We're just potentially introducing an issue, and that's what my client wishes to flag up as a concern.
Councillor
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose I haven't visited the site, so I can't really ponder. It does seem to me so you've got an industrial site, and then you've got to replace it. You will be placed on a residential property bang next to an industrial site. Maybe that's because I haven't visited the site and therefore I've only got just pictures on board, so I can't really say. There seems to be a bit of a problem, and I just never generally want to put a residential property bang next to an industrial site.
Excuse me, councillor, if you're making a comment here, not asking questions.
All right, well then that's the question. I'll turn around. Do you think, do you agree with me? Do you agree with me that in a sense we're putting a residential building next to an industrial site? Do you agree with that? So, for that bit.
a question, then.
Sounds like you're on the street now.
The current situation is that the existing bungalow is actually onto the boundary with the agricultural yard. So arguably, the introduction of an additional dwelling at a greater distance doesn't have that detrimental impact. As I said at the beginning of my brief presentation, Mr. Moten is not against developments as such in the village, he welcomes it, but it's just his concern about the possible conflict of putting the vehicular access to the new dwelling where it is.
But I'll just ask one question. It seems a bit obvious to me. Why don't you just take the wagons in the yard and unload them?
Because I understand his business has operated in the way it has done for many, many years. And so to then start taking vehicles into the site, that's going to take up storage area for the produce that goes there. It's not to say it's not a haulage yard, otherwise we'd have to turn it into a lorry park.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you. I think everybody's had their chance. Mrs. McIntyre. So the same applies, the 5 minutes and the bells, and then if you could stay in the seats in case people
Is that all right? Is it working?
Yeah, sure.
Hello, I'm Jenny McIntyre, the agent for the planning application. I just wanted to say a few words to ask the committee to support the planning officer's recommendation for approval. And the reason stated by the council for calling the application in was that, in their opinion, the proposal would be incongruous to its surroundings. Have you got the drawings, the application drawings here? Have you seen the block plan drawing 2C? I don't know if it's in the report. So this sort of shows it more in context of its surroundings. So where on a lot of these images in the committee report, it kind of shows it without the new houses on public gate. But yeah, you can see on the screen there, there's 9 new houses there, and it just it does fit in with the street theme. It turns the corner. It's close to the road frontage, the same as number 49 Old Main Road. It's also at a lower eaves height and a lower ridge height than the new dwelling. So it does fit in. It's also designed to be, it's orientated, but it doesn't overlook as well. So the main window space forward at the first floor. The raised floor it's only raised by 0.75 of a metre below from the flood risk. And by stepping down to the patio and raising the height of the fence, there wouldn't be any overlooking between the new dwelling and the existing. The applicant owns the existing dwelling, so they wouldn't have had something designed that they weren't happy with, that they felt would impact them. So this would be designed not to impact the host dwelling. So it's a 3-bedroom cottage, so it's quite a modest sized house, 1.5 stories high. So the objections made are about the access are not material planning consideration. The access is there. There's arguments over whether it's been properly made or not, but there is an access there. And that was approved several years ago. But the highway shouldn't be used as an extension of someone's business premises. There's no legal right to use it. And Lincolnshire Highways have provided a really detailed response where they say they've got no objections. While the they say, while the business blocks the access daily, your vehicles unloading and loading, the highway authority do not have the ability to control this. Equally, the business operator has not established any legal right to continue with this practice, and it's for the owner to find a way to lawfully conduct their business without using the highway. So they conclude that they would not object, highways would not object to this. There's another point to mention, that the way that the large HGVs park there every day, they actually make the road more dangerous because they block the view. So if you're driving out of a gate, you can't see if there's something coming along Old Main Road. So by having this access to the dwelling, using it as a dwelling, it would actually make the road safer because you couldn't really park blocking someone's access. So there's lots of reasons given in the report about why it should be approved. It doesn't have a harmful impact on the character, the appearance, and it doesn't have a harmful impact on the neighbours' privacy or amenity. It's acceptable in flood risk, subject to raising the floor and having different things. It will provide some swift bricks and boxes. It won't compromise the highway safety, and it will probably improve it by the fact that you can't park the vehicles near the junction on the road. There's lots of parking and cycle storage built in. So yeah, basically the proposed three-bed cottage meets the requirements of the relevant policies of the South East Lincolnshire local plan, and it should be granted planning permission.
Okay. Thank you for that. Have we got any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you were obviously responsible for designing this, is that right?
Yeah.
Did you not look at the vehicle access across the road and see whether there might be any problems or any issues?
It's not across the road, it's immediately next to it.
The next to it's
Yeah, it's like the two accesses are touching. We went with it because it was an existing access that was granted a few years ago. It hadn't been in regular use, but the access was there. And it also works in terms of like getting enough vehicles to park and turn. Actually works in that location.
You do not see any issues that might arise by having this access side to side?
Not really, because you get that everywhere. The issue is the parking of the lorries on the road. If the lorries were to pull into the yard, if they widen the access, move the shed, whatever they needed to do, you wouldn't have a problem.
Is there not an alternative access that you could have put into the plans?
It's difficult to see how you would get it to work if both houses were using the one existing access. I'm not sure. I don't think it would work.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Any further questions? Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still on the access and the lorry issue. So your client owns the property, you said.
Yeah.
Have they lived there in that property?
Yeah, they live there.
Okay. In your client's view or understanding, is there room? I haven't, like Councillor, I don't know the site, I haven't visited the site. Is there room in the yard for these lorries to pull in, even without moving any major kind of structure? Do you think?
I'm not sure because they have a big turning circle, don't they, HDBs? It might be to do with the width of the road, maybe, you know, I'm not sure if it's actually physically possible at the moment.
Okay, and the previous speaker said that his client had been operating there for 70 years. Do you happen to know if any of these sheds that prevent, if they do prevent access that he mentioned, the storage sheds, have they been built in recent years or have they been there all that time? Do you have any knowledge of that?
I don't know. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you. Councillor Brown. And I believe you do not have any time restriction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm the ward member for 5 villages, Parsnike included. I have no intention to insult the integrity of the planning officer or the person that's written this report. This application I cannot support because it is incongruous to its surroundings. Full planning permission was granted October 2010 for the construction of a new vehicular access, though Lincolnshire County Council indicates the proposed new dwelling is to be accessed via the secondary vehicle access of the host property that was granted in 2010. The vehicle access crossing over the highway verge has not been completed and is an unmade surface. Planning permission was refused October 2010 for the construction of a chalet bungalow with integral garage. One of the reasons for refusal was that it would appear incongruous in relation to the design and layout of the development in the surrounding area, and the flood risk assessment was considered inadequate. The owner of the agricultural yard, it is an agricultural yard, to the site's northern boundary objects to this application for many reasons. Chiefly, HGVs cannot access the yard given the width of the highway, and loading and unloading would require the removal of existing buildings and the removal of pallets and boxes and farm machinery. The agricultural yard has been established since 1952. The owners were not made aware of the planning permission of 2010, namely for the construction of a new vehicle access, or they would have objected to it. They consider the permission is now lapsed. There is no evidence that condition 2 attached to that permission was discharged, and no development commenced within 3 years of the date of approval. Current proposal will be visually incongruous as the proposal refused in October 2010. Furthermore, floor levels would be raised to 750 millimetre, that's 3/4 of a metre above the existing ground level. It would appear as an overdevelopment of a corner garden, introducing an elevated building close to the highway with a disproportionate area of the site taken for access and parking areas and minimal private amenity space available to the new dwelling. 2 local haulage companies in Leverton and Pinchbeck have expressed concerns that the new proposed access to this application would be unavoidably encouraged on a HGV vehicle on entry and leaving the agricultural site for the purpose of loading and unloading. Policy 10 on page 19 states 7,744 new dwellings shall be provided in Boston Borough between 2011 and 2036. It is considered the proposal will make a modest contribution towards this achievement. Really? One house? Also on page 19 at 7.5 states policy 2 of the local plan indicates developments will be permitted which will not have a harmful impact on the area, the appearance of the area. Policy 3 requires high quality design and layout and indicates designs which do not maximise opportunities to improve the character and quality of an area will be inappropriate. Yet page 20, 7.10 states little specific detail is provided concerning the materials the new dwelling will be constructed in. It's considered that these details will need to be sought by condition. On page 22, 7.24 states the application site is located in a flood risk zone 3 hazard rating of danger for most. Although there are areas of land within forest-like settlement, there sequentially preferable in terms of hazard and depth. None are available for development, so the sequential test is therefore passed. The application and accompanying documents do not address issues concerning water use. It is considered that to be dealt with by condition to require the water consumption of the dwellings not to exceed 110 litres per person per day. They will measure this. Finally, page 23, sentence 133, contamination. Has an assessment been made? Is it favourable or is it unfavourable? Considering this is a full application, permission has been applied, is lacking in detail in many areas. Full planning permission was denied in 2010 for any previous development. The agriculture yard being threatened, a business established since 1952, an overdevelopment of a corner garden plot. One development makes a contribution to Boston's 7,744 required housing. Policy 2 of the local plan states no housing shall harm the local area in character, yet details are omitted with regard to the materials being used. No assessment has been made as to contamination or not contamination of the yard. So, councillors, I urge you to consider very carefully my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Have we any questions? Councillor Roskin.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. That was a very, very good report. But there was so much in it. There was one detail that I couldn't just supply for me. You suggested that an application has lapsed. Is it possible to give me the reference or where it was in this report? I'm sorry, I wrote down the lapse but didn't get any greater detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. The one that has lapsed was B10 0318. That was for the construction of a new vehicle access, but that has lapsed now and no real progress was made on that. And then the following number, B10 0319, was the planning permission refusal for the chalet bungalow.
Any further questions?
Yeah.
No. Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. Do we know why it was never constructed? Was there a particular reason why the access was never used?
Well, the vehicle access crossing over the highway verge has not been completed and is an unmade surface. That's the only details I've got here.
What is the real reason why it was never taken and used?
Probably lack of interest or something like that. Or inappropriate, we don't know.
Thank you.
Councillor Dorian.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Brown. You did a very comprehensive report there, some of which was actually conflicting, but I don't want to get into all that. What I'd like to explore with you is you mentioned early on in your report that there was no vehicular access for HGVs because of the storage shed, but you also mentioned pallets, storage boxes and farm machinery. So what's to prevent the owner moving those items that are causing obstruction to allow the lorries access into his own yard?
Well, I assume this is a produce yard, and with produce going off to the supermarket, you have to have a varied stock of trays and pallets and things like that. They have to be in stock. So how could they just disappear? You send one lot off, you've got to have another lot of pallets and crates and whatever for the next day's delivery. So you've got to have those in stock. I understand here that certain buildings would have to be demolished and a bit of a yard clear up would have to be processed. So.
Thank you, Chair. So it's the yard clear up that I can't quite compute everything that's been said really. I understand why your resident might be reluctant to demolish a building. I don't understand why they're reluctant to clear up their yard. I mean, as I said, I've not visited, but on the site plan, it certainly looked like a big yard. But it's difficult to tell from just the drawings. So that's where I'm struggling, the fact that your resident seemed reluctant to clear up a yard, which would, after all, make the loading and unloading of those lorries much safer for the drivers involved, I think.
And that's true, I accept that comment, but the width of the road would not allow the swing out of an articulated lorry to enter that yard. So there's no point in clearing the yard because there isn't enough room in the yard anyway, having cleared it.
With that, I think that's we go on to the questions. I think we have to ask you to leave the meeting.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so so I'll now open it up for the full debate. Councillor, Officer Gills.
Thanks, Chairman. Just before you move into debate, and hopefully to assist with the debate, I just want to cover off a few of the questions and queries that seem to have come out so far. So in terms of Councillor Brown's comments about things like materials, contamination, etc., members will quite rightly know that it is quite possible for those matters to be dealt with by virtue of conditions. We have been providing some limited information on the application form in respect to materials, for example, that talk about facing, brickwork, imitation slates, etc. So it is fairly common practice for us to impose conditions in relation to those matters, and they can be dealt with satisfactorily. In terms of the access, a number of the comments have been raised around the previous permission. Has it expired? Has it not? What is the current state of affairs? The access is clearly there. Whether it has been lawfully completed, that is a higher bar test than we currently have, and we don't have the information to say one way or another whether it has lawfully been completed or not. The steer that we've had from the Highway Authority is it's unlikely that the full requirements of that permission were met to examine that matter. But that isn't the matter that's before you today. The matter that's before you today is whether or not the access to serve the dwelling as proposed now is acceptable in highway terms. And you'll see from the comments within the report that the Highway Authority are saying that even with the loading and unloading situation that is there, it's a low-speed residential environment, it's a single dwelling, there's adequate turning on site, they are not raising a highway objection. So the safety of that particular access, I'd say in the strongest possible terms, we don't have any evidence to say that that is contrary in highway safety terms. So just putting that out there. In terms of the access and the points about the usage of the adjacent site, I'm just going to ask Abby to pull up a Google Earth image, which will hopefully help for members' awareness of the situation. And so you can see the site there to the north of the application site. It has a couple of large buildings on it, and if you jump to the street scene view, Abby.
Sorry, can you point out where everything is on that one?
Yeah. So just take over steering for a second. So this is the site. The application site is here. The property that is owned by the applicants are here, and then this is the adjacent agricultural yard that is being referenced. You can see there's a large building here. There's a large building here, and there looks to be what appears to be a lorry back or a container in this position here. And you can see that throughout there are various bits of paraphernalia that are not uncommon with an agricultural site, and one would assume that those are pallets, etc., based on the site, the case officer's feedback from when the site was visited. In terms of, if we look at that in street scene view, Again, this is a dated photo taken off Google Street View, so it does come with a health warning, but this does give an appearance of how that entrance to the site is currently formed. And you can see there are pallets, there's a lorry back there, and you can see the building in the background, that photograph. And you can see in terms of how the relationship between the two accesses are, and how that is, yes, it's unmade part of the highway, and it hasn't been brought up to full standard, and yes, it probably has been utilised for loading and unloading in an informal and unregulated fashion. So hopefully that gives members a bit more of a feeling of what the situation is here. And as you'll see from the highway comments that have been submitted as part of the response from LCC, they do acknowledge that this is an unmade area. It has probably been used in an informal basis, and they aren't raising any issues in highway safety centres. And I've openly said actually this could be an opportunity for that situation to become a bit more organised in effect and formalised. Clearly, one of the questions that members will have in their minds is around, well, what implication does this have for the business? And does this mean that the business may have to change its working practices, etc.? That may be the case. There may be some elements there. There may be some intermittent conflict between the resultant users of the new access for the dwelling and this site. Ultimately, however, in planning terms, the highway advice that we're getting is that is not unsafe. And ultimately that will then become a neighbour to neighbour type issue that will need resolution. So hopefully that provides some useful context to the matters that we have heard from all of the speakers this morning. And one final comment about water usage that Councillor Brown made in his speech. Yes, that is a common practice in terms of imposing that condition to comply with the policies of your local plan. And effectively how that condition works is that is then taken forward as part of building regulations. So the fixtures and fittings that are installed when that building is constructed have to have that optional building regulation requirement in them to reduce the water usage. So commonly that is aerated taps that get used and other restrictions, but those are matters that are considered at building regulation stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the floor's open for debate. Councillor Austin.
Thank you. I've not made my mind up about this, but I'm pretty adamant that this application cannot cause a change of practice in an existing building. Sorry, an existing business. You can't say, well, I'll do this here, but they're going to have to do something about it. No. This is purely about this particular bungalow. And the fact that this existing business is there, it's part of the surroundings, if you like, isn't it? Although it's classed as industrial, but we do have to bear in mind that the key industry of the entire area is agriculture. And I don't feel that we can be expecting this storage business to change their practices just so that these people can build their bungalow or house, whichever their property, should say. You referred to it being lapsed, B/10/0318. Now, I know that obviously a planning application has so long before it lapses. So does that mean that they're really back to square one with opening up that access, or is it considered that they it's either lapsed or it is in use? I can't quite make my mind up. Are you able to enlighten me as to which it is? Because you know, I know that somebody would often people want to put in an application for maybe even an outline application, but if they don't take it out, then it's lapsed. So has it lapsed or hasn't it, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Austin, there's not much more I can say than what I said literally a couple of moments ago, that this is not an application to determine whether the 2010 application is live and could be continued to be implemented or whether it is lapsed. There is no evidence for me to sit here and say, in law, it's one way or the other. That's not the test that we've got. We are looking at the application before us for that access, and is the access for this dwelling acceptable or not? Yes, there's an entrance there. The applicants will claim that it has been implemented. The Highway Authority have given us their view that condition 2 on that permission has not been fully complied with in terms of submission of details and materials. But fundamentally, this is not a certificate of lawfulness. And so we are looking at the application as it is proposed as part of this application and whether or not that access is safe in highway safety terms. And the steer from the Highway Authority, from Lincolnshire County Council is that it is accepted.
Thank you. If I may just come out then. Yes, that's okay. And I just reiterate, they can build it, but they'll just have to put up with what's next door.
Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Chairman. I do have 2 questions really. First is, Mike, of the street, there are no W lines along that section. So therefore, a lorry can't cross the entrance to the agricultural yard, thereby obstructing the views down that road for everybody exiting from the new driveway, which has it as far as we now start to point from that. The other aspect is, isn't this backyard development within the back garden? Is that not backyard development? I thought we were rather opposed to that, the idea of building houses in the garden. That's the objective, is not to build in the backyard. I'll leave that. Okay, thank you.
And to yourself, Mr. Chairman, just in response to those 2 particular points, yes, there are no little yellow lines there. We've seen on applications before where if the County Council Highway Authority felt that that was absolutely necessary to make it felt unacceptable, they would make that request for a traffic regulation order. And they've not made that request. They consider that the relationship is acceptable with the existing use being there as part of that context. So there's little more I can add on that particular point. If a vehicle can legally park on the highway, it can legally park on the highway, and it's either down to the Highway Authority or the police to take action. Equally, as Councillor Austin says, if this development gets built, there then becomes a resultant relationship that ultimately is almost buyer beware to a certain degree in terms of somebody moving into that property. Taking your last point about backlands development, there is no such edict that says, in policy terms, you don't build on gardens. As clearly we set out in the report, policy 1 is satisfied in respect to this particular application. And when you take into consideration the character, the context, how this building will sit on the site, we as officers are recommending approval because we feel it's an acceptable form of development. And the term backland development, you have to then say, well, what is the impact of that? Is there a negative impact on amenity, character, context, design, etc.? You couldn't just say refuse because of backland development. So hopefully that gives the context of this, that in policy terms, we believe this proposal is fully compliant with policies of the South East local plan, the local plan of this council.
Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we've heard, this was refused planning in 2010 before it was an incongruous development. Rightly said, I think the difference now between 10 and 19 is we have a forward plan, and that village has actually grown. I don't think it is incongruous anymore to the location. I really don't understand why that access to that yard can't be improved. You've just seen the picture. There's many farmyards on small fen roads, but they don't load the lorries on the roads. They make sure that they can get into that farmyard. And when you look at the pictures, I think that could easily be altered. And as our planner pointed out, the parking on the roadway is not right. And actually, I think rightly, again, somebody pointed out, it's quite dangerous parking on that road. There is a junction not very far away. And I'm actually minded to support this application.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dorian.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with everything Councillor Riley just said. And having read the papers, heard the speakers, I'd like to move the recommendation that we pass this with all the conditions. And I just wondered if one of the officers might comment on adding a condition around the materials used to build the the property. And one last thing, I mean, whether there's a bungalow there or not, Mr. Chair, the applicant would clearly have the right to use that access all day long, should they wish to. So it's a moot point, really, what effect it might have on the yard next door. And I do really hope that it doesn't have a detrimental impact on that business. It's clearly a long-established family business, and I hope it continues to thrive. And I hope that the neighbours find a way to work together, Mr. Chair, without falling out. So I'd like to move the report with all the conditions and something about the material.
Can I still make a comment? Councillor Holbrook.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Ryan and Dorian, and I think the point is that it is not legal to park on the highway, so we shouldn't be seen to be condoning illegal practices. And that said it all in 7.46, really.
Okay. Our legal people just have a quick chat.
Just to clarify, it isn't unlawful to park on the highway when there are no parking restrictions, unless we've heard here there are no yellow lines. So technically, it is lawful to park on the highway in this location. However, there is no legal guaranteed right, for instance, to be able to park in that location. And obviously, it's going to slightly conflict, but yes, it is lawful to park there, but they are not. It's not their parking place. They don't own that land. It's highways land. If they happen to be able to park outside, they can. If, for instance, the neighbour, for instance, parked blocking their own driveway, and then the HGVs couldn't access it, would be, they would have to accommodate themselves elsewhere. So yes, so it's not illegal to park on the highway when there are no double yellow lines, but it is not a right to park on the highway.
7.46 was saying is not lawful.
She's using it.
Oh, okay, we speak more of
Well,
them.
we accommodated you just about every way, Councillor.
Chairman, I will use these microphones, and I know that you have to have them very close to you. And may I just say, I did not suggest that there was anything wrong with the produce company and doing what they're doing. It's acceptable.
Okay. Councillor Pierpoint.
Thank you, Chairman. I listened to both people in regards to the application for and against, and they both put compelling cases forward. However, in life, things progress and develop, and I feel that we can't just stop an application because of a business next door that's been going for 70 years and can't adjust to the changes of the environment and the marketplace. I'm actually happy to support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Bedford.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, as per normal, I actually went down and had a look at the site, as I do every site. The map we've got on page 13 is years out of date to start with, because project date has altered beyond all recognition in all of their houses down. The farmyard, to me, it just needs good old-fashioned cleaning. And yes, you could reverse an HGV into that yard for loading and unloading. The main road across there used to be the A17, for goodness sake. So to turn around and say it's not wide enough to do it is absolutely ridiculous. The only thing that hasn't been done, to my mind, on the whole application was the fact that the entrance hasn't been topped properly. It's just still a powdered dressing. Although surely part of the condition would be, that's got to be done properly. So I'll fully support the application.
Thank you. I mean, my only comment on all this is I see nothing wrong with a business. All I will say is that improving your working practices does only good for health and safety and lots of reasons. So that's my final comment on it. And with that, Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wright, would you like to?
Yes, I'm happy to second it.
I'll second it.
3 seconds, Mr. Chair, just to confirm for the proposer and seconder, we have got a materials condition attached to this proposal, that condition went through.
Right, can you all vote for? None against and no abstentions, I believe. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Okay. Just to inform, we've got 1 or 2 people less for the meeting, so we can take a 5-minute break if everybody is agreeable.
You can squeeze by me anytime.
Mike's have a look on YouTube. Is it
You're not the one now. Well, 2 minutes.
What is it interest?
He's all right, yeah. Little more than nuisance.
Yeah, it's the nuisance, yeah.
Bloody nuisance. Really.
No.
Today, your man station. Big difference.
Difficult wearing heels. Information I didn't know. Yeah. That's exactly
So,
Takes us further. You take this and that'll be off the conversation.
yeah. Should we wait for now? Obviously, yeah. Okay, welcome back everybody. Now we move on to planning application B230012 on page 31 of the agenda. And again, Abby Marwood will be.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is the plan application B230112. It's an outline application for a two-storey dwelling, all land reserved, at the Atlantic River of Bush Lightning in Curtin Mills. The site is currently part of a pasture field, comprises a long, slender site located in the countryside, but within an existing group of 3 dwellings. Seeking outline permission for a 2-bed, 2-storey detached dwelling. The application has been called in by Councillor Ralph Pryke. He's raised concerns that the council is permitted dwellings elsewhere in the countryside without a sequential test, and the occupants of all rural sites will be card dependent, and that should apply for a particular application. There's been an objection from the neighbour concerned around impacts on their property and the area's character. In terms of consultations, we've had no objections from consultees, including environmental health, the drainage board, and the County Council. In terms of the main issues, the site is located in a countryside location. It's approximately 450 minutes from the nearest settlement, which is Curtin End. It's not necessary for its location, and it's demonstrated no particular economic, community, or environmental benefits as a result of the proposal. The nearest services and facilities are 2 kilometres distant from Curtin and need to be accessed by an unlit rural road without footways that might be bulging to be made by car. In terms of the calling request, there was some precedent cited, just look at these. So B210097, this was allowed by appeal in 2018, and at the time the council didn't have 5-year land supply. And B220309, this was recently granted by the Commission. The main differences between these 2 sites is the report concluded that the proposal was contrary to policy 1, but it was acceptable because it was previously developed land and visually related more to the village than to the open countryside. Just as an example, that's Curtin, and you can see there in the red lines are 2 precedents that were put forward. In terms of character and appearance, the officer report concludes that another dwelling in a group of 3 would not look alien within the existing landscape. It would not be isolated as defined in the MPPF, although it is located in the countryside and the country's policy model. It will be set back from the road, and we have good separation distance from the existing neighbours. In terms of highway safety, no objection to the concerns raised by the highway authorities. The site is in flood zone 3 and it would be exposed to depths of between 0.75 and 1.25 metres. There's been no supplementary test provided to demonstrate that alternative sites are not available to be exposed below this. So therefore, the officer report recommends 2 reasons for refusal. One is the location of the countryside, distance from facilities and reliance on a private car, country's policy one. And the second reason for refusal is the lack of a successful sequential test, country's policy four.
Well, thank you, Ms. Lord. Mr. Goldsmith. Would you like to come forward and take a seat? You also have your 5 minutes and the bells will call. And then we ask you to keep seated in case anybody would like to ask you.
Mr. Chair.
No,
Can you hear that? Sorry. I'm objecting to this proposal for a number of reasons. Although the house won't be overlooked, our stables and our meadows will be. Because where the house is built, it's facing our land. And obviously the noise that will come out of it. The drain's very close to our building boundary. Because the point that they're trying to build the house is only 10 metres wide. You know, a metre off the fence the other side, so it's actually only 3 metres away from the fence. The reason they're setting the house back is because of the width of the house, basically. Comes in the other way. We're going to lose the views with an 1.8 metre fence, but that's superior to a hedge that's poisonous to the horses. Trucks and cars could possibly be parked out the front of our house, removing a bit of grass that we have in front of their house. Yeah, I don't see the garage is 4 metres wide and facing our land. So how can you get a car into that? Because if you look at, you're not going to have it against the past against the boundary at 10 metres. You could have maintenance room. So again, you could have 3 metres to be able to turn the car and get it into the garage. I do have a suggestion that if this is approved, that the planners move the whole building and garage further down to the point it's 132 metres down, which is 17 metres wide. It would be tight and they would overlook their own land rather than the neighbours' land. I mean, who wants to buy a house where you can't see their own land? And the postcode is going to be PE21 PE, not 1 PP. So it's completely different postcode to what's on the agenda. That's all I've got, thank you.
thank you for that. Do we have any questions? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you explain again, please, the width of the garage? You say the garage is 4 metres width. What is the length of the garage?
Sorry, it wasn't the comment.
Length, that was the length.
Councillor Brown, use your microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I do apologise.
Right, okay, let's clear that one up. Thank you.
Yeah. It just all seems very, very tight.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
What was the answer?
I got it wrong. It was the length, not the width.
Oh,
Then you try and get a car in there as well. Parking bay next to it.
Well, in old money, council garages were always 16 by 8.
yeah, you're having a conversation there. I'm
Sorry.
Are there any more questions? You can't speak. Councillor Dory.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't catch your name. Was the unit submitted these documents?
Yes.
Okay.
It was just an overview, it wasn't.
Is it okay to ask questions on these documents? So could you explain, thank you for providing these. So have you got one in front of you, you understand? So could you tell us, where you live on this, this picture?
Territory farm, right next door to
What you put?
the house.
Oh, that,
This is an old picture, so the menage has changed.
okay. And, could you just clarify, you've annotated the, picture with the number 7 and the number 10. Would you just clarify what it is you're asking the committee to consider with regards to
Right. They're proposing to build a house here with the garage. And the gates here. So you have to come top bits here, one big car in the garage. And then walk along the side into the house. The upper story of the house, although not totally overlooking the house because of the stables, would be overlooking the menage and everything we do on the yard with our animals. And any sudden noises would startle anyone in the menage with the horses. Be dangerous. But if they move the whole lot down to here, which is the end, which is 17 metres, although it's tight, they can turn the whole house that way, put it down the end, and overlook their own land.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. We can go back to your original document. And now we have Councillor Cry. Oh, sorry, we've got Mrs. Sarah Burton. Would you like to come forward? So again, you have the 5-minute rule and bells.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for hearing me. My name's Sarah Burton, my husband and I are the applicants, and you received your a little notice of objections there, and I'd just like to reply to those, if I may. The objector's property is already somewhat overlooked from Holly Cottage on the other side, as is Holly Cottage from Cherry Tree Farm, or Spilly Farm Cottage as it was formerly known. Holly Cottage is a working equestrian small holding with normal everyday noise. The proposed site in the application would just be a house of typical traditional Lincolnshire build. The menage and stable area at Cherry Tree Farm there already has a hedge and tree lined boundary along it. The menage is unused with grass and weeds growing in it, and wooden pallets and pipework just stored on the ground. The planning permission for the menage was for private use only, and as none of their animals are rideable, it's falling into disrepair. The dwelling on the proposed plot, just for the illustrations of the application, sited slightly north of centre, and the application is only for outline planning, and this design could be changed as needed. It was just to give an idea of what it could look like. So one of the points made that the building could cause flooding to the neighbours. I don't know any building work in Curtin End or the surrounding areas that cause the neighbours to flood. Another point raised was for a 1.8 metre fence, which would cause lots of views. The 1.8 metre fence was suggested after the objector's previous objection to hedging being too slow growing. And the only stretch along the complete southern boundary between our property and Cherry Tree Farm, which extends to approximately 300 metres in total. There is only 18 metres of it which does not have hedging or trees along it. The impact to any loss of views, which currently is just my hayfield, is minimal to say the least. I can't see why any trucks or cars would want to be parked outside the proposed plot, or especially in front of Cherry Tree Farm, when there is plenty of room. I don't understand that one. And the application is for outline permission. It's not a full permission, it's just an outline. So the illustrations used for the dwelling can be changed, can be moved, can be recited as necessary. As the objector indicated, he would not have a problem if the dwelling was moved in orientation and sited further back in the plot. Again, that could be something that would be done on full planning permission. And he's also correct in his postal code. Postal code for where I live is PE21 PP, and of course Drainside North is PE21 PE. When we bought our property just under 10 years ago, we always thought that if it ever did become too much for us, with it having a gated entrance onto Drainside North, we could put something smaller at the other end so we could carry on living in the countryside. My husband has connections to the area since birth, and we still have, we've been here for a fair long while. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. Now, Councillor Pratt, if you can take a seat, please. And again, you have no time on screens. Ready for us.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Ralph Pryke. I'm a ward member for Kirkton Loch Brampton Ward. 2 ward colleagues are on your committee. I'd like to address you on some of the points in the reports, which I think could do with a bit of explanation. The first one is about the flood risk as a reason for not granting this outline application. Virtually the whole of the area is within flood zones 2 and 3, which, if you applied your policies very strictly, nothing would get built. Obviously, people get around that by building up, whether it's 3/4 of a metre or a metre or whatever. That is done quite often, but not absolutely everywhere. There are properties which are not raised that far, and therefore they are at risk. And that's obviously why the Environment Agency colours the whole area in blue and makes it hard for people to get insurance because of that. That's something we have to live with around here, but with new properties, absolutely can mitigate against the flood risk and elevate the properties that they're proposing. On the sequential test, which the planners say has not been met, with no other site locally at lower risk. The last single house application I can remember in this area was a new house in a garden, I think 322 Willoughby Road. I'm interested to hear that you are basically opposed to building houses in gardens, but that has been allowed in Curtin End. The building is, the house is now being built. Because there is no higher ground anywhere nearby, it's virtually impossible to meet the sequential test. And has been ignored in other cases, as listed in the, you talked from the other areas in Curtin, particularly the new estates, the large one on Middlegate Road, the Woodland Road, the Birch Road estate, Bill Beach Garden, all new buildings. They're all meeting these tests by building up. And they are some within the development line of the village, but some are not. The Middlegate Road one in particular was outside the area. It was strongly opposed by Frampton Parish Council and I believe the councillors, the borough councillors at the time. It was refused by your committee, but approved on appeal. It's now going up. On the principle of development objection with policy 1 of the local plan, meeting 1 of 2 tests. The first one is that it is necessary, the application is necessary to its location. This application is not a speculative building application. It is a consideration of perhaps downsizing or other family members from the generation above the applicants, above Mr. and Mrs. Burton, or below them, to move into the property, or to do a property swap if the Burtons downsize to a new property on this long, thin plot, which would obviously be adjacent to their existing house on Monklight Lane. On the point of sustainable development needs, because cars might be necessary for people living in property this distance from Curtin. Well, pretty well everyone in the country areas south of Boston, probably north of Boston as well, has access to 1 or more vehicles. So there's nothing unusual in having a car. Certainly people in Curtin End have cars, but I'll acknowledge they also walk and cycle to different places. They cycle to St Michael's Church at the other end of Mouse Lane, for example, and they cycle to Curtin for the shops and the churches and the activities that are happening in Curtin. I'm not sure they'll probably go as far as Curtin Hove for the activities that are happening in the church there. But they do. So the car, while advantageous, is not absolutely vital, and the need for a car in a rural property, new rural property, should not really be total objection to allowing that property to be built. Okay, on the point of overlooking the menage next door, I first became aware of the arrangements here when I saw a card in Wiverton Co-op that an equestrian business was for sale. I assumed it was your business. So, okay, I'm mistaken. It might be Holly Tree Cottage instead, that was being advertised for sale. But I understand that the objector has horses which may use the menage. They appear to obviously at the moment. But many people keep horses with houses relatively near to them and do not suffer, the horses do not suffer from noise, excessive or otherwise, from a neighbouring property. So I really don't think that overlooking a menage is much of a reason for saying no to this. As I said, this is not a speculative build. Unlike some of the permissions that have been granted recently in the area, store on the display the parts of Curtin End which are outside the settlement boundary of Curtin End, which have been given permission. And there's a a new estate on Donington Road in Curtin End of, I think, 8 rather large bungalows. They have been there now for 2 years. Most of them were unsold for more than a year, and they have been marketed at people in London and the South East to come here and retire because our property prices are so cheap. They're on sale for around £500,000. And for Londoners, that's cheap. But of course, most local people who want a house around here can't afford that much. The other development on the former caravan sales site, which was more recently given permission, may or may not be speculative. It was proposed as being a mixture of bungalows and houses for people to purchase in the area. And from the site plan, they look to be large properties and might be a similar price to the one that was still unsold around the corner. Now, the last point I wanted to refer to is the nature of the plot. It was seen from the plan and from the photograph that it is a long, narrow piece of land. It's used at the moment just for hay, because it's not much use for anything else. It's not really economic for other cultivation. The persons are not farmers. They're not smallholders. So they crop the hay occasionally. That's it. It's the equivalent of a rural brownfield site, in as much as it's land that would otherwise be unused. But, as in Curtin End, lands that have not been in previous use was given permission for housing. So I would urge you to uphold or not accept this recommendation to reject the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do you want to make a comment on this time? Any questions? We have to ask you to leave now. Okay, so the floor is open for debate.
Through yourself, Chairman, and just to hopefully again assist with the debate, I just wanted to clarify on a few points that have been raised by various speakers. In terms of the layout, the design, the positioning of the dwelling, just reiterate that as per the report, this is all matters reserved as an outline application. So all we are looking at is the pure principle of a dwelling in this location. So the position on the plot, where the access is, where the garage is, whether there is a garage even, they're all up for later consideration in the event that this was approved. And just wanted to pick up on a couple of points that Councillor Pryke has referenced and provided some clarification. This is not a brownfield site, it is a greenfield site, and it is located in the countryside as defined by the local plan. The reference to the appeal schemes that has been given, and hopefully we've covered those off, but there were significant material differences between those schemes and where we are now, most notably in reference to the scheme that was allowed to appeal, that was allowed at a time when we didn't have a 5-year land supply and we were in a transition between the old local plan and the new. In terms of the point around personal circumstances and this being not a speculative build, you've heard from the speaker that of their intention. However, the application as presented is not presented to us in that manner. There is no information about the need for this particular dwelling, so we have to treat it purely as a new dwelling in that countryside location. And even if we were to take on board those personal circumstances, as per your training members, we're dealing with the land use, and so take the personal circumstances and give it appropriate weight as you may see fit. But I do say it with that health warning that if we granted planning permission, there is no fundamental requirement for those people to live there, or ultimately that they couldn't move the property on or whatever. And final piece I'd just like to say is around flood risk and sequential test, exceptions test, and the technical. So when we're looking at flood risk, there are three elements that we have to look at. First is the sequential test. Fundamentally, policy at a national level says, if you've got a flood zone, does that use need to be in that location? Therefore, that's where the sequential test comes in. If you conclude that the sequential test is passed, you can then move on to the exceptions test. So that is to say, what other exceptional circumstances are there that say you should allow this dwelling in this location? And then moving on, you get to the technical test, i.e. is it going to be resistant to flood risk over its lifetime? Other people that live there can be safe. Where Councillor Bright was coming from was effectively to reverse that test and say, well, technically it complies in terms of flood risk, it's going to be raised out of the ground, there's mitigation, etc. in place. There was no consideration of the exceptions test, i.e. what's the need for this dwelling in this location? And sequentially, well, all the area floods, therefore, where's the problem? That is not the correct application of the sequential test. And we as an authority cannot ignore the sequential test. We can say one has been completed and it fails, but there are other reasons. We can say one's not been completed and therefore it fails. We have to weigh it within the planning balance. We just cannot simply ignore it. And as this application stands before you today, there is not a sequential test that we as officers can either say is sufficiently comprehensive to either pass or fail. So therefore, hence the second reason. So just to summarise where we are on this as an application, the application has two reasons for refusal. They are interlinked, but fundamentally they come back to the test of this location, this site is outside the settlement boundary, it's in the countryside. Our strategy, as set out in policy 1, is to direct development to the towns, then the villages, then the smaller settlements like Curtain End, and then the countryside is a last area of resort where development restraint is to be exercised. And then in this case, there are no justification for that location, and on top of that, it fails the sequential test. So hopefully that summarises and addresses some of the points that have been raised by the speakers.
Councillor Ryder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I ask any questions, I'd like to have a more better look at the site plan, please. It was quite a long way away and couldn't really work out what was near it.
So just for clarification purposes, Councillor Ryder, the blue circle shows the location of the dwelling is within that area as proposed. And you can see Curtain End to the north. So the red circle here is where the site is located, with the access to the road coming down through here. At the point of the cursor. There. Curtain End starts here, at the point of the cursor here. And that has a settlement boundary. Curtain End has a settlement boundary. And then again, going back to the site, the access road comes down through here. And then this is the settlement boundary for Curtain over here. So you can clearly see that in terms of that position, it is outside of the settlement boundaries as defined in the local plan and is therefore in an area designated the local countryside.
I get that. I just wanted to be able to see more fully what we've got either side of this field, please.
So again, this is the proposed site plan that's been submitted, which shows buildings to either side. And if we go to this drawing, you can see those in a bit more detail. So this is the farmhouse reference. This is a stable building that's referenced. This is a menage. I believe this is a stable building as well. And then this is future cottage at the point of their cursor here. So on either side, it is fair to say, on either side of the site, there are residential properties at the front of it. But if we go to the, and again, it is all matters reserved, but as the speaker, the objector says, because of the width of the plot, the dwelling as positioned is indicatively shown here. Now, the point I come back to is we are only looking at the principle of development. And so, you know, it is technically feasible that somebody could come up with a dwelling in this location here. So the point is, yes, there are buildings on either side. It is part of an existing group of buildings. But fundamentally, from a starting position to the policy test, it is in open countryside. like that helps.
Councillor Woodley.
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose the point I'd make, I say is that the entire road is actually underside on the basis that we can't do this development. I mean, we wouldn't be able to do any development. And obviously those buildings have been built. The final one next is that's the Curtin. I said the services, is it? The shops there. It's just a housing sector is taken on to the country. So, I mean, if we can allow developments in Curtin End with a large number of houses with no facilities, a bit of sticky ground to refuse one property, which is much closer to Curtin and Curtin End. My concern about it is it's going to be guarding Curtin End, is it? Yeah. Curtin End is being a community. I know people who live there, but I mean, I wouldn't regard it as a community. There's no facilities, no shops. I think that lots of them. So we seem to be opposed to one house being developed along the road. There are a number of developments, and then you have habits to have developments in Curtin End where there are lots of houses and no facilities, and a long way from the end, which does have shops. The other thing I want to point out is that only everybody in this area needs a car. Because unfortunately, there's no very little public transport as such. Wherever you live, even if you live in a town, it seems to me that you need a motor vehicle. All the sad things that we're living in. So I think the test about the need for a motor car is somewhat pointless. Thank you, Chairman.
And thank you, Chairman. Again, just to hopefully clarify a couple of those points raised by Councillor Woodley. I do appreciate where you're coming from in terms of the houses that are already there. Now, clearly, if those weren't there and we were considering them against the policies that we have now, we would be, recommending refusal for those applications. We can't roll back time and the dwellings that were possibly built before planning permission was actually required for them in some cases. Those were considered against the policies that were in place at that time, based on national policy and local adopted plans by this council. But we are where we are now, and as you know, in planning legislation, we have to apply the policies of our development plan first. And I come back to the point that our local plan has gone through independent testing and examination that establishes a settlement hierarchy based on sustainability that looks to focus development towards the town first, then larger villages, then other settlements and service centres such as Curtin End, and when we talk about that settlement, that recognises it doesn't necessarily have all the facilities, and it is reliant on other settlements like Curtin to provide some of those facilities. But effectively, you've got a critical mass of dwellings in that area that make it a sustainable place, and it does have access to some limited facilities, and it is easily. Well, it's relatively easy to connect to other properties. Then beyond that, the plan seeks to exercise a development restraint on other areas outside of those settlement boundaries. So everywhere that's outside the settlement boundary is classed as countryside. But this is countryside. We shouldn't be encouraging development in the countryside. We should be looking to focus it based on our strategy that we have in our local plan. So, as I say, all I can guide you to is apply your development plan as it is now, not as how you would like it to be, how you want it to be, or how it was 50, 40, 50, 60 years ago. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do seem to be saying a lot this morning. I think we all have to look at this as an outline planning permission. Once this is granted, they can change it and do whatever they possibly wish. The other thing that concerns me is it isn't a brownfield site, it's open farmland. There's a very narrow strip as you look at that piece of ground, and they're having to build beyond the building line. It does concern me greatly that where are we going with this? We are now looking at building on open farmland. So everybody that's got a field, are they going to come to us and say we want to build a house? It makes no difference regarding speculative build. I understand there is a downside, but we have no control over the property once it's built and what they do with it. to me, the site is very, very narrow. I was always led to believe that plots needed to be a little bit larger than that. We talk about Curtain End. Curtain End is a village. Yes, it hasn't got any amenities, but it is on a bus route. First site, as we heard, was built because we had a lack of 5-year development. The second, there are already buildings there. I am minded to support the planners on this one and decline the application.
Councillor Dorian.
Thank you, Chair. I have a great deal of sympathy with the applicant. I really feel for you and your husband. I thought you spoke very well, and it seems unfair, really, that our officers want to refuse you building on what is your own land and your own little piece of Great Britain. However, I'm more persuaded by the local plan that we've adopted. We've adopted it for good reason. I agree with all the sentiments expressed around building on open countryside. I thought Councillor Pride's reference to that being a brownfield site was unhelpful and inaccurate. So I really do feel for you and your husband, and I'm sorry that you're in the position you're in. I think you're probably genuinely just looking to explore and exploit what you already own. But unfortunately, our local plan, Chair, would not permit that in its current form. And I very much believe that we should protect as much of our countryside and arable land as we possibly can. So I move the recommendation that we refuse the application.
Thank you. I will just add that I would hate to set a precedence here by building on countryside. Where does it? In 6 months' time, will we have a lot more applications in the countryside because we've allowed this one? So that's my final comment. Do we have a second? Councillor Ron.
Yeah, I'm happy to second Councillor Dorian's.
Okay. All those in favour?
I think it's one more space, sorry.
Councillor Austin.
I just say, Chairman, that you said we haven't been given a chance to speak. So it's what I understand the arguments that people have tried to give, have given, and like Curtain End may not have any facilities now. But of course it did many years ago, and like a lot of places, they've fallen by the wayside. A pub that I remember there, basically because people have cars now. However, the point is Curtain End is a settlement that we accept as a settlement, whereas we are looking at what in our terms is open countryside. And therefore, I would be supporting the recommendation to refuse. In other words, what is in the officer's report. And I understand why people are in sort of two minds. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we now?
Nobody else wants to speak, Jenny.
All those in support this application with a refusal, please show.
Was it in June? Sorry. I beg your pardon, sir.
And one abstention. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry, I have to explain that that application has been refused. That's it. Right, so now we move on to our third item of business today. And this was for B220356 on page 47 of the agenda. And this is the Borough that Borough will take us through.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an application from proposed developments for the solar farm, including underground grid connection, access improvement works, and ancillary development on land at Big in Boston. Just to summarise in terms of comments received, there was an error that was picked up within the report in terms of paragraph 6.12 of the report in terms of it says Lincolnshire County Council. This is a highways comment. They are not objected to the development subject to conditions and authorities, but we have received a comment from Lincolnshire County Council Strategic Manager, which has objected to the application in terms of cumulative issues and loss of agricultural land. We just wanted to pick up that concern that was raised. So as you can see, this is the site location one. It's a little bit slow. So the application has been brought to committee and has been called in by Councillor Cooper on cumulative impacts on residents. So as you can see, this is a cross-boundary application, and a large portion of the site is within the boundary of South Holland District Council. So I have outlined in black, sorry, the mouse is a bit slow, but the authority boundary. So you can see the actual in there where the boundary is. So this area is Boston and this area is South Holland District Council. So the application site overall will involve approximately 97.3 hectares of land, and the output of the solar panels will be 49.995 megawatts during peak operation, which would power thousands of homes. So this will be fed into the Big Fen National Grid substation via underground cables, which you can see the outline here in red, where the underground cables will be located to the substation, which is located here. So we have received objections from neighbouring properties and the parish council in terms of loss of agricultural land, highways impacts and residential amenity issues. However, although I did explain within the other slide, we have received an objection from Lincolnshire County Council Strategic Manager. No further objections have been received from consultees subject to conditions which are outlined within the report. So this is the proposed site plan. There we go. Which shows the areas of where the solar panels will be located. So as you can see, they are scattered throughout the site with various other operations, including single-storey buildings, access improvements, and there will be fencing and landscaping incorporated within the design. So this is just giving an elevational detail of what the solar panels will look like. So they will be secured to the ground by steel piles. And also just showing some, a typical building that will be on the site. So all buildings on the site will be single storey, and there are various buildings on site, including the battery control building and the switchgear buildings. So just going through some of the photos of the area. So these are photos looking from Cowbridge Road. So this is the field where the solar farm will be located. And again, from Cowbridge Road, it is a little bit small, but as you can see to the right, there is the wind turbines there. And these are photos from Ing Lane. Again, just showing where the solar panels will be located. And again, as you can see to the right, there are the wind turbines. And again, these are photos from the bigger substation. So behind this photo is where the substation is located. And it's just giving a bit of context of where the cabling will be located to and also where the solar panels will be located. So just going through some of the issues outlined in the report. So in terms of principle of the application, the MPPF and the local plan, in particular policy 1 and 31, supports renewable energy. So also outlined within these policies, it just asks for certain criteria, including the environmental benefits. So the applicant has provided information in terms of biodiversity net gain, and this will provide a significant amount of net gain. In terms of community benefits, they have stated that supplying low carbon energy over time would reduce emissions from fossil fuel generation, improve long-term air quality, and would also reduce climate change. And in terms of economic benefits, so 100% retention of business rates from renewable energy proposal. This will be on top of the initial investment. It would also reduce construction phase employment, the contribution of construction phase to economic output, and also permanent job creation. So in terms of loss of agricultural land, I have provided a bit of a context plan in terms of other renewable energy projects within the immediate area. So as you can see, it outlined the circle in blue is the Tritton substation. To the west is the Vicarage Drove solar farm. Next to that is the wind turbines, and again, the big fence substation is next to that with the parking link to the south, with the application site outlined in the box in red. So in terms of loss of agricultural land, the agent and applicant have provided a survey in terms of best and most versatile land. So according to Natural England, there are certain gradings in terms of agricultural land, with grade 1 being excellent in terms of agricultural land, and then grade 5 being the worst. So in terms of their survey, it does conclude that 87.2% of the site is a grade 3A due to the wetness of the area. So there is a lot of land that is a grade 3A. Natural England were consulted in terms of loss of agricultural land, and they also raised no objections. Again, as you saw on the drawing, the solar panels will be secured to the ground by steel poles, so there wouldn't be any permanent loss of agricultural land policy. This has also been secured via a condition and will be decommissioned after the 40-year period. The applicant has also provided details of various projects, as well as those indicated on the plan in front of you. Applications that have been submitted to councils and national infrastructure projects, such as the Heckington Fen Energy Park, again the Vicarage Drove solar farm, the Little Hale solar farm, and the Big Fen solar farm. Cumulatively, they would result in a reversible loss of approximately 514 hectares of best and most versatile land. However, Lincolnshire has approximately 381,000 hectares of best and most versatile agricultural land. Therefore, the cumulative impact of all 4 solar projects will approximately be 0.13% of the total available resource within the county. So in terms of just picking up again in terms of cumulative effect and also food security. So again, the land would not be fully removed as agricultural land. They have stated that the land can still be used for sheep grazing due to how the solar panels have been designed. However, also removing land from production for a period of time can have beneficial effects, improve over time, reducing the need for fertilisers. So in terms of food security, particularly in terms of wheat and barley, the agent has actually provided DEFRA statistics as stated in paragraph 7.41 of the report, which indicates that the development will represent a reduction of less than 0.006% of wheat production and less than 0.01% of barley production, which is considered minimum. So in terms of land and visual impacts, the agent has submitted a landscape and visual impact assessment. So it does say the effects of the landscape character would not be significant. As you can see, the electricity generation and supply and food structure in this area is well established, as shown on the slide, and visually prominent influence upon the landscape locally. Also, the solar panels and associated structures will be less prominent than existing features on site, and new plans in one enclose the site. And when established, the openness of the fenland landscape would reduce, and this would ensure that there would be a short-term significant visual effects experienced by both residents and also public right-of-ways. So in terms of sensitive areas and heritage, so this area isn't actually within a sensitive area, and it's also not sensitive in terms of landscaping, and there's no conservation area designations, and there are no listed buildings on the site itself. All assets are a sufficient distance away, which would not cause substantial harm, which is also agreed by Heritage Lincolnshire, who have raised no objections. In terms of archaeology, however, Heritage Lincolnshire did assess the site, and they have raised no objections subject to a written scheme of investigation prior to the development. So in terms of highway safety, the transport statement has been provided stating vehicle movement. This has been raised by this concern has been raised by residents and also the parish council, but there has been significant discussions undertaken with the agent and the Lincolnshire County Council Highways Officer. So I have provided a little access drawing which shows the routes, which is the County Council's preference. So heavy vehicles would have arrived via the Viking Link route, which is Route 1, which is outlined in blue, which is to the southwest. And light vehicles use the Cowbridge Drove and Ing Drove route, which is Route 2, which is outlined in green, which is further to the east of the site. This is so not to disrupt residents. And again, the Lincolnshire Council have raised no objections subject to safeguarding conditions, and there would be no issues in terms of highway safety. So just going on to ecology, an assessment has been provided and concluded no significant effects on wildlife, including birds and bats. The submitted biodiversity net gain report confirms the proposal will result in a substantial gain of habitat units and also hedgerow units. Furthermore, as shown on this slide, there will be a skylark mitigation area in one of the fields next to the solar farm to encourage them to nest adjacent to the site. So the area is hatched in green, as you can see to the east. So a condition has been applied to the recommendation, which secures this area and incorporates the area into the overall landscape and ecological management plan for the entire site. So in terms of residential amenity, a noise assessment has been submitted. It has indicated that there would likely be some disruption during the construction and decommissioning phases of the development, but once completed, any noise impact should be relatively minimal. And the council's environmental health officer has also raised no objections. Just a little side note in terms of a concern that has been raised is in terms of limiting glare, which a study was also provided. So it indicated that vegetation will block views of the reflective area, and the reflective capability would be similar to or less than that of still water. And again, Lincolnshire County Council, highways officers and the environmental health officers have raised no objections. So just in conclusion, just going through all the considerations that I've just iterated. So the local and government policy supports the development of renewable energy sources, including solar power. It is clear from national planning policy and guidance that environmental considerations must not be overridden or disregarded, and that issues of landscape and visual amenity and agricultural land take must be given significant weight. However, it is also clear that renewable energy development is a national imperative. Therefore, proposals should be supported where possible and approved where impacts are or can be acceptable. So on this basis, as iterated before, the development would result in small temporary loss of agricultural land, which can also be used for sheep grazing. And in terms of issues outlined, there will be minimal impact on the overall area and landscape and to nearby residents. The development also provides sufficient and substantial amounts of biodiversity net gain, as you can see there. And on this basis, subject to conditions, we are seeking recommend approval. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Lauren. Excellent presentation there. We do have some speakers, and I ask Mr. Ray to come forward. I suppose you've got it as long as Lauren. So you've got 5 minutes, and the bell will ring at 4 minutes 30 seconds.
Very good. I assume you can hear me okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this committee. I'm Chris Ray, the owner and operator of Ray Farms, farm in partnership with Mark Ronson, JT Liver. Between us, we're leasing 96% of the land to AGR for solar development. As a family, we've been farming in Dicker Fen and Donington area for around 100 years. We currently farm 250 hectares. The area we're leasing to the solar farm is 38 hectares, which is approximately 15% of our current farmed area. I find it frustrating when people talk about food security and loss of agricultural land. Let me explain. I, as most farmers do, see myself as the custodian of the countryside. It's in my interest to look after it. I live in the middle of it. It supplies my income to live on. And I want it to be as good or better for the next generation of farmers. I grow commodities. As such, I have no say in the price I will receive 18 months after I've drilled my crop. Sadly, recently, with growing input costs and cheap imports, the margin I make on these crops is less and less. To keep my business viable, I'm always looking for alternatives. This year, my colleague, Mr. Rollinson, has 60 hectares of maize for energy production. Next year, between us, we will have over 100 hectares of maize for energy production. Not that we don't want to grow food, but more that the obsession with cheap food is making it less and less sustainable to grow on heavy, dirty land. Let me give you some background to this. The land that Mr. Rollinson and I are looking to lease to AGR is what we call heavy land. We can grow cereals on it with no premium crops, and it can't be rented out. Meaning our return from this land is very limited. And to add to that pressure from pernicious weeds called blackgrass. Spent £200 a hectare this year trying to control it, failing miserably, all meaning the feasibility of this land for food production is bordered upon. Hence the reason for environmentally friendly solar panels. I'll be the first to admit that in the past we've removed hedgerows and filled in dikes, always chasing the margins on lower and lower prices, never increasing input costs. I'd love to plant hedges around the farm, but the maintenance cost and negative effect it will have on our efficient shaped fields makes it impractical. That's why I'm so pleased AGR are including extensive hedgerows and planting belts around the solar panels. Once established, we might return that area to be something like what I remember as a boy. It will also increase the amount of wildlife in that area tenfold. Uncultivated land with minor human intrusion and large hedges offers everything I don't on my commercial farm land. The sheep grazing under the panels too, have like some sort of wildlife integrity. We don't employ anybody in our farm currently, so it's great to know AGR can talk to local contractors discussing potential work. In discussions with AGR, fantastic to employing local people and contractors as to them. I'd also like to know I live less than 500 metres from the ongoing biking link convert station project. And I have little to no disruption from this department. As such, I have no issues with this solar construction project. We fully support the solar project and strongly encourage the committee to approve and for this department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. You just hang on there, see if we have any questions for you. Do we have any questions? Councillor Wilkley.
Thanks, Chairman. Sorry, I can't get my focus. Do you agree with me that the day of cheap is when it's really over? Given the fact that we've seen the Ukraine war going on and the issues there means that there's probably going to be foreseeable for some time, in which case the cost of wheat and other things are going to skyrocket. Do you not think that the day of cheap food is over?
We've been saying that for years and years, that production, with more and more people in the world and need more and more food. It probably will happen maybe in 40 years' time or 50 years' time, but we've never seen it. And to put in reality, Putin's just declared that he's not prepared to open the Black Sea again. But I think the price of wheat jumped £5. Was that yesterday, I think that happened, but then it came straight back down again. Because it's all leaving Ukraine through other means now. And the price, where it's at the minute, if wheat I sell this year, I will make probably enough to cover my costs, but my profit on that. See, on those fields, I'll lose money. That's just because the top line there. As a whole, it's not a great deal for us at all.
Thanks, Chairman.
Just wanted to make a commentary. Would the Skylark breeding season be protected in terms of building and decommissioning?
Probably a question for AGR.
As if this goes through.
Do you mean would the construction things happen during the Skylark breeding season?
Yeah.
I'm sure they will have that environmental plan.
It was actually mentioned about the Skylark, that area being protected.
There is an area set aside specifically that is undeveloped. Probably be something it isn't going to stay construction on that part of land.
And the second question is, would this be a proposal to actually encourage the biodiversity in terms of wildflower meadows and all that around this area rather than ordering it off as sheep grazing and things like that?
Yeah, there's an area that is sheep won't be on, like the environmental area, and the rest of the sheep on the pavement, but it still goes. You know, paddocks look like they go rough, don't they? They never fucking law, and they kind of have a lot of natural roughness to them, which is what wildlife loves. As a farmer, we hate to see it. We like nice, clean, sterile fields. But for the wildlife, roughness and that kind of all over restrictions is.
And how high is this panels going to be placed?
Don't know. What's happening? I'll probably go tell you that.
Okay, well, thank you, for that, Mr. Ray. And now we have Mr. Luke, Rogers, and Mr. Rosenley.
Yeah.
Mr. Rogers talking and we'll let when the difficult questions. Okay. Again, you've got the 5 minutes. And the bells will ring.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. My name is Luke Rogers, work at AGR, developer of this scheme. AGR is an experienced renewable energy developer with a track record of over 10 years. We're committed to maximising the benefits of our projects to the local economy while offering employment and educational opportunities. We've already contacted several local schools and universities to offer talks, site visits and study opportunities. Pre-commencement condition 16 will secure an education, training and employment management plan. The UK government is committed to a net zero electricity system by 2035 and has a clear target to increase solar capacity by nearly fivefold by 2035. Borough Council has also set its own target to achieve net zero. Its climate change strategy, published in the spring of 2022, states small-scale renewable solutions, together with large-scale developments, are going to be essential to achieving net zero operations. It is in response to both national and local government targets that AGR proposes to implement solar farm. This is the project that can make a meaningful contribution towards those net zero ambitions. The Big Fen solar farm is designed to generate sufficient clean renewable energy to power 18,000 homes annually, equivalent to approximately half of the residential properties in Boston. One of the key challenges facing renewable energy projects is securing a grid connection. Many projects are unable to secure grid connections before 2035. A key consideration in the project location is the Big Fen substation, which is one of few substations across the country with sufficient spare capacity to accept new generation. If approved, this solar farm will be built and generating electricity into the grid by June 2025. We've worked hard to secure that grid connection. And that comes without the need for significant and disruptive grid upgrades. A short cable route to the grid connection point is critical, and that's why the project has been deliberately located as close to the Big Fen substation as possible. This minimises disruptions to the local highway network and minimises the electrical losses suffered when transporting electricity over long distance. The project design incorporates new hedgerow, woodland planting, alongside wildflower meadows and species-rich grassland. The design also incorporates dedicated 20-acre area for creation of ground nesting bird habitat. This is to be secured by planning condition 20. Using DEFRA's own biodiversity net gain calculator, the project will deliver gain of 119% overall. This includes a 1,000% increase in hedgerow units, which is well aligned with the tree and hedgerow strategy introduced by South and East Lincolnshire Council's partnership in 2022. Yes, the land the project is located on is classified as Western Versatile agricultural land. However, the project area of 97 hectares represents just 0.03% of the BNV agricultural land in Lincolnshire. Recent successful planning appeal decisions made to the Secretary of State have confirmed that solar farms do not result in the permanent loss of BNV agricultural land, and Natural England has also confirmed that satisfied the land can revert to agricultural use after solar farm operation. Restoration of solar farm over farmland should be secured by planning condition 4. Furthermore, farming activity will continue on the site in the form of sheep grazing. AGR already has confirmed interest from 2 farmers who wish to grow sheep on the solar farm. AGR has worked hard to review the responses to the public and statutory consultation process. There were 4 public comments to address. We've taken guidance from both the planning officer and independent consultants to incorporate mitigation measures into the project design. These mitigation measures are to be secured by planning commission. An extensive planting scheme to provide screening of the site from sensitive viewpoints is secured by conditions 18 and 19. Construction traffic routing and management plan to minimise disruption has been agreed with the local highways authority and will carry traffic direct from the A502 to the site and away from the local villages of Norfolk and Vicar Park. This is secured by conditions 13 and 14. In conclusion, the UK is falling behind its delivery of renewable energy projects, and we are seeing the impact of climate change and receiving daily news about frequent extreme weather and record-breaking temperatures. The time to act really is now. Your experienced planning officer has undertaken a careful balancing exercise and has concluded there are material considerations that weigh heavily in favour of the application. I urge you to follow the officer's recommendations and grant approval for this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So now we allow questions on Mr. Roden. So, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask, I'm sure you mentioned A502. Do you mean the A52?
Yes, they're 52.
Right, okay, I've heard that wrong. Right, I've got a couple of disabled elderly people who live on Cowbridge Road who have been threatened and intimidated by the transport fraternity for making comments about this. Can you give me any guarantee that Cowbridge Road will not be used? Because you built two, not you personally, but there are two new roads to this site, one off the A17 and one off the A52. Can you give me any reassurance that Cowbridge Road will not be used? Not with several to large vehicles anyway.
So the agreement with the highways and the Highways Authority through the consultation process provides the use of two existing but private haul roads.
Which are what?
The biking link access, which was highlighted as Route 1.
I didn't understand that. There was two built.
I'm going to talk you through it. And so the first route from the A52 to the west side of the site,
right,
routes up to the west side of the site, joins using the biking link road. That will be used for the delivery of materials to site. There's then a separate exit route which exits on the Cowbridge Road, goes a couple of hundred metres down Cowbridge Road, and then joins Private Hall Road, which runs directly north-south, and that's labelled as Route 2 and shown in green, runs down to the A52 again. This circular motion of vehicles avoids any chance of two-way traffic meeting head-on and not being able to pass each other. And that plan is agreed in cooperation with the Highways Authority. The Highways Authority have also recommended a condition, which is part of the recommendation for approval, and that condition is to carry out a survey and condition of Cowbridge Road. And the obligation is then on the developer to ensure that that road does not deteriorate further from its current condition. Does that answer your question?
Kind of, yes. So we're exiting down Cowbridge Road, then we're turning almost in a hairpin bend. That's better.
That's a distance of about 25 to 50 metres between the short section that runs east-west on that road, where the end of the arrow of the road is.
Okay. Is there any discipline being attached to your lorry drivers in the sense of not threatening people or speeding?
Certainly. So with all of the projects that AGR is involved in, we're very conscious of working with the local population and making sure that we go along as best as we can without any conflict where possible. And that includes vigorous enforcement of our construction management plans.
Right, okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Dorian.
Thank you, Chair. I think if any resident suffers any kind of harassment, it's just a matter of linking to police rather than judgment here. I just wanted to clarify one of the statistics you mentioned. We talked about the number of hectares being used of arable land, described in percentages. Planning officer described it as 0.13%, and you described it as 0.03%. Could we have that? Yeah.
Certainly clarify that. So the planning officer's report covers the cumulative impact of this scheme, the already approved Vicarage Grove scheme, and two other schemes which are known to the planning authority that have not yet been approved. The 0.13 figure took into account all of those four schemes added together as a percentage of Lincolnshire Western West land. I was simply talking about this specific scheme as being 0.0.
Thank you for that clarification. I just want to pick up on your one of your initial points when you talked about your outreach to local education establishments. Could you tell us what form that takes when you engage with schools and local colleges?
Yeah, certainly. So we've looked at the local schools in the area, selected 5 local schools and 2 reasonably local universities. We've written to those universities and schools. For the universities, we're trying to form a partnership with them where they will study the biodiversity situation prior to any activity on site taking place, and then come back and study the site during construction, and then study the site once operational to give a true picture of how the biodiversity on the site changes over that period of time. Because I feel like that's perhaps an area that isn't particularly well studied in the industry at the moment. I don't want to make a difference there. From the school's perspective, we've targeted both junior schools and senior schools. And the idea there that we've offered is to go and do talks at the site to explain the development process. We'll talk through the construction activity, but clearly there can't be any site visits take place during construction for health and safety reasons. But site commissions, we will hold open days and guided tours around the site in a safe manner. That's something that we've done successfully at other sites.
Chair, I would really encourage you to continue that work, and if you need name contacts in schools, do reach out to local councillors and perhaps even the planning officers. We do have a member staff here that engages with schools on a regular basis. As to the universities, you may have to go wider afield depending on what courses they offer. It might not be specialised to Lincoln University, for instance. But thank you very much for your input today.
Councillor Baldry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just sat here with my black spruce house on it. So page 81, in the reports. Bylaws number 10 regarding the non-meter law. It just says here that it is not acceptable to encroach upon that law. Yet they feel that circumstances that it appears that some of the screening appears to encroach upon that non-meter law.
Check the drawings with dimensions, geolocated drawings with dimensions on them, and we're not inside the 9-metre bylaw. We work with Blackslivs or other drainage boards across the country, are well aware of their bylaws, and actually engaged with the drainage board to discuss the implementation of culverts proposed in some of the water courses, and also confirm the separation distance they require to allow access for them to maintain those drainage strictures. So I'm very confident that we're outside of the required by law of the zones.
And that includes security fencing as well.
It does indeed, yes.
Any obstructions? So there's no obstructions within the 9 metre.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. The question I have is, I suppose, is the power generated subsidised by government? Do you have subsidy from
All subsidies for renewable energy in government ended under the ROC benefit regimes in 2015. And since then, solar power has been unsubsidised.
Another question really, I suppose, in the report you say that 50 megawatts will give a peak power, but less than that. Is that, solar powers depend on light, don't they? So it'd be this time of year you get to a maximum amount of power. Of course, there's less demand had for it, whereas in December, when there's a lot less demand, then peak power will fall significantly. So in the winter months, it's not going to be generating a great deal of electricity. This have you ever picked up what you saying December?
In terms of the seasonality, I don't have that to hand, but what I can say is that this project is located with battery storage, and battery storage gives the project the ability to store the energy generated by the solar so that it's released into the grid at the most useful time based on the demand on the grid. So, for example, in those winter months, the electricity generated during the day that's then required for everyone's heating and putting the kettle on when people get home, is that peak in demand. That happens during darkness. But the battery storage on site will store the electricity generated during the day, ready for it to be released when it's most needed at that peak demand time by 6 o'clock.
Of course, in the winter time, I think have say 8 hours at night.
Yeah.
You have 16 hours a day. So, you know, it's not going to be able to meet the demand for thousands of houses.
The 18,000 homes is based on and the overall average annual consumption throughout the year. So at peak generation times during the summer, we'd be generating more than the 18,000 homes. During the winter, less than if you took it on a day-to-day basis.
It's just the base load.
Yes, so that's those statistics based on Ofgem's projections of average. I mean, the average UK home uses over a year.
Yes, we obviously use power at different times. Sometimes a day we use a great deal of power, not the much power, so it's at our time. The other thing I'm thinking about is that obviously they're going to be growing sheep underneath the house. The only thing I know about that is that the sheep is time back, and that's not in line with the health down. Whereas meat and bread pots are
The council, which we're, straying off.
I didn't know. I apologise. I have a reputation taking the
Get your roles back on that. Councillor Pierpont, rescue.
What he wants to start being source, that's what I think. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I'd be interested to know what happens during construction. What sort of access do the public have to talk to you about any problems and issues? And how proactive are you in communicating with the public about things that's happening or any problems or anything that you need to be aware of? Because during a construction like this, there's going to be a lot of issues. But I think residents and local would want to be reassured that they're not going to be overlooked. I don't like the idea of lorry drivers telling residents to really get off. So I want some reassurance that, you know, what's going to happen is there's plenty of access to communication, consultation on the process of the construction.
Yes, I think it should be communicated to you now that we're an experienced developer with an extensive track record of developing solar farms, wind farms, and also a large glasshouse operation in Ely, Cambridgeshire. And the reason I mention those projects is those projects have included significant liaison with the local population. It's mostly been around building grid connection routes, for example. Now, there are far less residencies on that would be affected by this grid connection route, but that experience that we've gained there by communicating clearly when work will take place, what measures we're taking to reduce impacts on the local residents is very important. And those are the principles that we'll take forward into the development of this scheme. Our experienced network of contractors carry out this type of work on a daily basis. They understand the importance of managing the relationship with local communities, and that's a priority for us. We don't want to be a bad neighbour here. What we want to do is provide clean, renewable energy, take a step forward in climate change targets and reaching those goals, and work with the local population. So where we can engage with the local population, whether that be through formal routes with the local parish council or with individuals, we will do that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that's the end of the questions. If you'd like to return to your seats, we'll open the floor for general discussion. Thank you all for the question. Fine.
Thank you, Chairman. And again, hopefully to assist the debate, having just reviewed the conditions, in light of some of the issues that Councillor Brown has alluded to, having been on the receiving end of some of those complaints that have come to the Borough Authority, what we found is that the National Grid, for example, when they've been undertaking the work, they had a really clear comms and engagement approach within their construction management plan. So what I'm actually going to suggest to members is, under my delegation, I've got to amend condition 14, which is the construction management plan condition, to incorporate communications, engagement, and a complaints procedure. Because ultimately, the first port of call should be developers, not necessarily the council, for those complaints, because then issues can be addressed at the source. And so I looked, with your blessing, to look to incorporate that as a change to condition 14.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Councillor.
I do understand the plight of farmers at the moment. I do understand that they all have to look at diversification. 2027, they'll lose all their rural payments. So I do fully understand that. I am a farmer's wife. I was disappointed to see this application on productive farmland, losing it to solar power. We have been told that it is owned grade 3 land. And again, this is not easy to manage, and it does have to be managed. And as we heard, there are blackwash issues. We've had 3 serious events in the last 5 years affecting the food chain. 2019, we saw wheat production down by 2/3 because we had a very wet winter. Farmers are guided by the weather. 2020, COVID hit and we were struggling with imports. 2022, as we heard, we had the Ukraine war. They are huge exporters of wheat, and it made an impact on sales. But what we have to remember is we are a growing population, and we may have plenty of electricity, but probably not a lot of food. I don't understand why we're looking at areas like this to put solar panels on when we have plenty of areas of grassland that are not viable for food production. We talk about sheep grazing, and as I said, you know, these sites can be done on grassland that is no good for food production. It is only a small percentage of land being taken up for food production, but we have a big island, and that's why it shows that it's small. And again, we are a growing island, and we have to start and think, where does our food come from? It doesn't come off Tesco shelves. It just concerns me that we're more concerned about, let's get some electricity. We're not thinking about where food comes from. Thank you.
Councillor Glory.
Thank you, Chair. I really liked what Farmer Ray had to say. I thought that you brought to life really the plight of farmers currently, and that it isn't all halcyon times, and that some land is very difficult to farm, and that the big supermarket chains exploit farmers to the nth degree, squeezing margin every step of the way. And I thought you presented that case really well. I am really, really concerned about climate change and about man-made climate change and global warming. And I think we all have to look at what's going on in Europe at the moment, Jeff, to see that the devastating impacts that has on communities and people's lives. And for that reason, we have to stop using fossil fuels. And if we don't have fossil fuels, then we have to look at renewables and sustainable energy. So it's a reluctant position that I'm taking today. I hear what you say, Councillor Rylett, and I agree with you to an extent. I think that the energy crisis is too great right now and for us to ignore it. I'm sure I read somewhere, and perhaps it's something that you chaps could think about. Wasn't it in France they instructed every public car park and supermarket car park to have solar panels above it? Is that in France? And you think Turkey as well, yeah. So you think about those vast spaces, and if you put solar panels above them, because they're just car parks, it's not a bad idea. And one that you might, I know you're obviously going to have to raise your panels up into the air somehow. I'm sure it's not beyond the realms of possibility, but it would solve the problem of using arable land. So I am going to support this today, and would encourage you to look at other means of. I took your point about the grid. You need access to the grid, and you have to be nearby. So I'm going to support this, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to move the referendum.
Councillor Waldron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, Councillor Marion, it's a good point. The point that I was going to make is it's what the gentleman said. There are very few substations that can accommodate the energy provided by these new solar panels. So unfortunately, for us in this area, if we have bigger fen on the national grid, we will get more and more applications as, but also we have the land. So this is not where it's going to end until more substations are built that can accommodate this new power. They will come our way. I think there's only 5 or 6 in the country, isn't there? There's not many. Thank you.
Councillor Woodward.
Thanks, Chairman. I fully support the position taken by Councillor Ryan. I think we would the growing of food is absolutely key. If any ways of generating electricity, I don't think that taking chunks of countryside or solar panels on is the right way forward. We need to grow food. So I will not be supporting this application. I will not be supporting the application. Right, okay?
Yes, I did the second.
All right, thank you. I will not be supporting the application. Thank you.
Councillor Bedford.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Well, I will be supporting the application. On the day that the first wind turbines went down Bickerfen, obviously Bickerfen now is the renewable electricity receiving centre for Lincolnshire. It really is, and anybody who hasn't ridden down there ought to go and have a look at it. And I know the other one is in South Holland on Mr. Ray's land, but I mean, that is a magnificent building and probably iron rotten stone. But the way it's been coloured and everything else, you cannot see it there. There's a lot more obviously going to be happening down at Bickerfen with the Lincolnshire Water Partnership with a new reservoir, which will be just across the other side in Spirit and Slade and wherever. The river will flow the other way, so there's an awful lot of work to go on in Bickerfen. And we won't be losing agricultural land because the sheep will be quite happy underneath there. The solar farm at Leverton, which has been there now 10 years, I would think, something like that. And the sheep under there every day. It's kept nice because the sheep keep it now. The only thing I would like, that Councillor Wilder reported on page 81 about the black slopes, that actually becomes a condition. If you can make that into an additional planning condition, then it gives the black slopes and any other drainage pool the protection that they need, and we're not really getting that. So I think that I'd be happy if that was added to, if there is a proposal in the second year. If not, then I'll propose that it is given permission, but that is added to it. And as far as complaints are concerned, I go back to when the original wind farm was constructed. And very good luck with people, because I remember it well. Thank you.
Okay, Mike, what's the think?
It's not often I say no to Councillor Bedford when it comes to adding additional conditions, but this is something where we're blurring between planning legislation and IDB bylaws. I would, in the strongest possible terms, suggest that we don't include that as a condition, because the responsibility is for the IDB to enforce it if indeed somebody breaches that. You've heard from the applicants today that they don't consider that any of their development is within that 9-metre boundary. So therefore, in terms of the planning decision, I'm confident that we don't require any more information, and that imposing a condition would be ultra vires and wouldn't stand the test of it, if it was to be challenged by the applicants at him. So the point is that there is an informative on the decision notice, that highlights the IDB requirement. The applicants have heard the concern, and I don't think we need any additional controls in this instance.
Councillor Bedford.
Yeah, thank you. It's the black slopes management that I'm continually saying that the planning system are not backing their requirements, because their machines are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They need the 9 metres. And if it's there and backed up by us as a planning authority, on top of their bylaws, then it really does give them power. Because believe me, they've had problems going to people and saying, yes, we've got the right with this 9 metres. It's cost them a lot of money because, quite simply, the planning system is not backing them up as far as the obligations. That's all I'm asking for. That is added to give them the extra power to tighten that system up.
If I may, Councillor Bedford, it's probably a conversation to pick offline because I know exactly the issue that you're referring to, having had conversations with the IDB ourselves. As you will well know, the NPPF and planning policy generally says that if there are other legislative powers, they are allowed to act, and we're supposed to assume that they can act on their own merits. Therefore, in this case, it's an IDB bylaw. There is nothing in planning policy that says we must have a 9 metre area around the edge. From a planning perspective, as we've seen on many other circumstances, you can permit development right up to the boundary. If somebody can't build it because they're contravening a bylaw or a covenant on the land, that is a civil matter between those parties. So, whilst I understand the spirit in which you're trying to produce this, it is not something that legally we can do in terms of planning decision making, but happy to pick up the wider conversation in terms of that relationship with you and other Black Sluice representatives of this council and bring you up to speed on the engagement that we've had. But fundamentally, I come back to my point, the applicant has heard it, they've confirmed they're not going to encroach on it anyway. We've got an informative which reiterates the point and highlights it, and a condition is one step too far, and I would absolutely suggest to the committee that is one step too far for this committee to go to impose that condition. At the end of the day, I'll do what you instruct us to do as officers, but I can only tell you the health warnings that come with it. Thank you.
Thank you. When does that leave us then? Is that a proposal to put this in, or do we have a vote on that?
Chairman, according to my report, we've had a proposal from Councillor Dorian to approve the application in line with Officer's recommendation. I do need to ask whether that's in addition to the changes to condition 14, because obviously Mike updated the Officer recommendation, so we just need to address that. Do you want to come on that very quickly?
Yeah, to incorporate planning officers, assistant directors recommendation on item 14. I sadly don't support you formally through this process, Councillor Bedford, based on the officer's advice. I do support you informally in the IDB. I would just like recommendations as they are with item 14 amended.
Thank you, Councillor. So we have the proposal on the table that I don't believe has been seconded as yet, and obviously Councillor Dorian doesn't support Councillor Bedford's, proposal to update the proposal on the table. That's very backward, but I think we understand where we are. So we have a proposal, Officer recommendation with the changes to condition 14 at present, not seconded.
I will withdraw then that part with the Black Sluice, and I'm sure when they're here Thursday morning, isn't it? Yeah. That can be taken up outside of the meeting, but I still then move it.
I agree, Councillor Bedford. There's lots of time and it's something that we do need to sort out and support the drainage board around that. So I'm part of IDP as well, so I'm fully in support of that. So have we got a second, Councillor Dearpoint? So we can move to vote to approve. All those in favour?
Chairman?
Please. Against? Okay. Yeah, so I'll just confirm that is approved. Right, move on to your.
Mr. Chairman, can I please be excused? I've got to go pay the mayor at the
As long as you would have to. As long as you make it in time.
It's how I feel.
Okay, Right, so trying to move quickly along this is close to one. We now have our final item of business today on page 85 of the agenda, and is a report titled Infrastructure Funding Statement. And I believe Mr. Gildersleeve will take us through this.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, conscious of time, very, very briefly, this is a report that's before you for noting, which is for the attachment in reference to the infrastructure funding statement for 21-22. This is a requirement that we have to report on to government in line with the community infrastructure levy regulations. The monitoring period is from the 1st of April 2021 to the 31st of March 22. And basically it sets out what new Section 106 agreements we've entered into in that year, any obligation triggers, what that's likely to bring in terms of either funding or affordable housing, etc. And it also then tells you how much we've received from the bodies and how much has been paid out or how much has been delivered. The key bit to note is the actual report that's attached to Appendix A, and then in summary, we've had 11 new developer agreements entered into over the period, which contain a total over £1.8 billion worth of monetary contributions and 300 new affordable housing units to be provided within the borough. And then on a wider basis, it reports that 118 affordable housing units were delivered in 21-22. We received £455,000 as a community towards affordable housing in the borough. And education contributions were received in relation to into 4 Fields Primary School at Sutton and 5 additional places at St Thomas's School. There were also health contributions in relation to additional facilities at Y&Z Surgery. On top of that, we also got the confirmation of the access and the link road as part of the quadrant, linking the A16 and the Old London Road, is now open. And we received approximately £5,000 in monitoring fees that go towards the cost of the council's cost of monitoring those agreements. I'll say no more than that. We do have to say, other than say, it's piece of good news. We have to report it to government and it's there for awareness. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Are there any questions? I think all we have to do is note this, isn't it? There's no vote on it. So as long as you sound straight and narrow.
I think it's highly unlikely now. The question I've got is I looked at Section 106 agreement to give money to a primary school. What about the secondary school? I'd say that any secondary schools receive any funding from the Section 106 agreement. It may be not possible to state on it, given that we're on yet.
I'm happy to cover it. In terms of secondary school obligations, in terms of education contribution generally, the agreements themselves set out whether it's a request for primary, secondary or sixth form or a combination thereof. In this particular case, you'll see at 6.2 on page 96, in terms of the new agreements, there is money that will go towards provision of secondary and sixth form education places. But you will see in terms of the 6.3, the money we've received in year was in relation to primary school places. So there will be secondary educational contributions that come on as those developments that are referred to at 6.2 come on stream later down the line. But it is reflective of each individual circumstance, each individual request that's made by the county council as the education authority.
I will be interested to know whether or not Boston Grammar School's received an the system over the last 5 years. So if you want to write to me separately, it would be interested in that because I believe the process was changed some years ago because certain schools were being excluded from Section 106. And the rules changed in the village school. Such like Boston Grammar School, where they don't actually have a catchment area as such. Some schools can. Right. We don't have the area. Boston Grammar School, indeed, like Boston High School, not there. Was else excluded from benefits of 106. I'd be interested to know that not 10.
Well, they're not excluded from the benefits of Section 106 and wouldn't have been historically. It would have come down to how they engage with the county council as the local education authority and what requests they and in combination with the education authority are made in relation to particular developments. And so if they've made requests, then those would have been duly considered at that time. But certainly I can feed back in terms of any, I'll get Elaine Henson, our Section 106 officer, to come back to you on that particular point about whether there's any in relation to Boston Grammar School specifically.
Because there was a ruling on about 5, 6, 7 years ago, that certain schools would not be included. Boston Grammar School doesn't have to be required, because they didn't have to find that. But because they looked at the schools which has some students here about defining something like A9. So they were schools, so I know the ruling was changed. Some was made to put pressure on that council to make a change. And to do this whether like Boston Grammar School had A9. And received key benefits as staff. Section was, we realised it.
Well, everybody, it's been a testing meeting. I think the last one was a pretty good one, but I think that brings us to the end of business for this meeting. And thanks to all the committee members, along with all the officers who supported us very well today. Thank you. We meet again at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, the 12th of September.